How to buy real estate in Joá, Rio de Janeiro as a foreign citizen. I'm filming today from Rio de Janeiro and we will talk about Joá, the cliffside pocket where the city suddenly feels quieter, higher and more private. You can almost forget you are minutes away from the energy of Zona Sul and Barra. If you are a foreign citizen considering a property purchase in Joá, Rio de Janeiro, Joá is one of those neighborhoods people hear about later in the process, usually after they have already toured Leblon, Ipanema, Copacabana, and thought to themselves, well, we love Rio, we just want more space and more peace. Joá can deliver that in a way few places in Rio can, but it also demands a different kind of decision making. Here, the right property isn't just about finishing and view, it's about access, sunlight, engineering, privacy, and choosing the right micro-location. So your home feels effortless, not complicated. In this video, I will explain how international buyers approach Joá intelligently, what makes the neighborhood unique, what to watch for before you commit, and how we help clients narrow their choices quickly without getting lost in the listing fog. And stay with me until the end because I will explain our property shortlist service, which is the fastest way to go from I am curious about Joá to these three are the only options worth my time. Who am I? If you haven't met me before, I'm Camila Saunier, principal of Camila Saunier Realty. I work with foreign buyers who want a real purchase handled with a structure, clarity, and a process that feels aligned with international standards. If Joá is on your short list, tell me what you are aiming for in the comment section. Are you prioritizing total privacy, a family home with outdoor space, lock in and leave second residence, or an asset with long-term value? The way you answer that question changes what good looks like in Joá. One essential disclaimer before we go further. I'm a realtor, not an attorney, and nothing in this video should be interpreted as legal or tax advice. Foreign buyers can absolutely purchase in Brazil, but the transaction needs to be handled correctly. That's why our real estate works in coordination with Oliveira lawyers. Together, we support clients with the pieces foreigners most often need: due diligence, immigration strategy, and currency exchange compliance. So the purchase is not only exciting, but also safe and properly documented. Also, if you appreciate this style of practical, reality-based guidance, help me out. Like and subscribe this video and follow me. We publish new content about Brazil constantly and the goal is always the same: fewer surprises and better decisions. A real luxury map where the highest prices concentrate in Rio de Janeiro. Let's position Joá correctly because it's often misunderstood. When people talk about Rio's most expensive neighborhoods, 5 names dominate the conversation: Leblon, Ipanema, Lagoa, Jardim Botânico, and Gávea. Joá typically sits outside that exact top 5 list. But here's why it still belongs in a luxury conversation. Joá competes on a different axis. In Leblon and Ipanema, you often pay a premium for walkability and the prestige of being in the center of everything. In Joá, the premium is more about privacy, dramatic views, and the possibility of having real space, often with a house-like lifestyle that is difficult to find in the densest part of Zona Sul. So, if your goal is the best neighborhood, Joá may or may not be your answer. But if your goal is the best fit, Joá can be considered and might be what you need. Why Joá costs what it costs? Joá's value begins with the landscape. This is a cliffside neighborhood with a very limited footprint. There isn't a broad grid of streets expanding outwards, and there isn't an endless inventory of apartments being added each year. Much of what exists is already established, and the most desirable properties tend to be tightly held. Another driver in this lifestyle profile. Joá attracts buyers who want real's natural beauty, but with a more discreet rhythm. It's not a neighborhood you choose for crowds and constant motion. You choose it for what private balcony over the ocean feels. And finally, Joá has strategic positioning. It sits between São Conrado and Barra, which means more than many foreigners expect. It can be a very intelligent base if your life in Rio involves both south and west zone. The result is a niche luxury market, not mass demand, but highly committed demand for the right buyer type. And that is often what keeps prices strong. Micro-Joá, where foreigners misread the market and where they buy it well. Joá is small, but it's not uniform. The experience changes quickly depending on where the property sits and how it's assessed. Some of the most sought after properties are the cliffside homes with the wide ocean exposure, where the view feels cinematic. These can be extraordinary, but they also come with responsibilities. In Joá, a buyer who loves the view but ignores the property long-term upkeep plan can end up frustrated. Then, there are properties higher up where you gain more privacy and sometimes even broader views. This can feel like a sanctuary, but you need to be honest about logistics. In certain pockets, your daily life becomes more car dependent and access conditions matter. A home can be stunning and still be inconvenient if the road, parking, and lot doesn't match your real routine. You will also hear many people mention Joatinga, which is closely associated with Joá and is known for a private community feel and a strong lifestyle appeal. Buyers love it for the sense of separation from the city and for the way it feels like real but calmer. If that is on your radar, you want to evaluate it with the same discipline: governance, access, and documentation. And finally, there is the practical question of proximity. Some Joá properties feel closer to São Conrado's daily infrastructure, while others lean more towards Barra's rhythm. If your family depends on schools, fitness, shopping, or specific commute flows, this detail is not small. Here's what I want you to take from this section. In Joá, foreigners don't usually make mistakes because they choose Joá. The mistake happens when they choose Joá without choosing the right versions of it. The leverage foreign buyers often bring to Joá's negotiations. Joá is not a market where you can rely on leverage pricing logic. Properties can vary dramatically based on the view, land access, and privacy. That said, international buyers often have an advantage when they come prepared. Brazil's finance involvement can limit some local demand, especially when borrowing is expensive. In premium segments, many transactions loan towards cash or strong liquidity. Foreign buyers who are well organized, clear on their criteria, and ready to move with the structure often negotiate better than they expected. Not by being aggressive, but by being credible. In Joá, seriousness matters. Sellers respond differently when they see a buyer who is understanding what they are purchasing and has the right professional supporting behind them. The foreign buyer roadmap. Let's make the process feel simple. Even though the transaction itself has important details, most foreign buyers will need a CPF, which is the Brazilian tax identification number used for formal transactions. Once that foundation is in place, the real work begins. Choose the right property and protecting the purchase through the due diligence. For international clients, the purchase should be designed to function smoothly even if you are not living in Brazil full-time. During this process, practical handles, including admin steps and banking limitations for non-residents, are manageable, but they should be handled through a structured approach, not improvisation. When it comes to core protection steps, due diligence, this is where the transactions become safe. It's where the property's status documentation, seller's conditions, and potential risks are identified. You also need to plan for total acquisition costs beyond the purchase price. In Rio, buyers typically face a municipal transfer tax and additional notary and registry expenses. I'm mentioning this so you can budget well, not as an advice, and this is precisely where your legal team should guide you. Finally, there is the international money movement component. Funds should be transferred correctly and documented properly. This is one of the areas where our coordination with Oliveira lawyers is especially valuable for foreigners because it brings compliance discipline to a step that can otherwise feel confusing from abroad. The Joá Short List Filter. Joá is a neighborhood where a smart filter saves you months. When we evaluate Joá options for foreign clients, we pay attention to the factors that actually control quality of life here. The first filter is micro-location and exposure. View matters, but so do sunlight, wind, humidity patterns, and the way the property feels at different times of the day. A home can look perfect at noon and feel completely different in the late afternoon. The second filter is access to functionality. Joá is not built like a flat walkable grid. Driveways, street approach, parking realities, and ease of entry all matters. You want a home that feels elegant, not one that feels like a daily obstacle course. The third filter is structural reality. In cliffsides and hillside properties, engineering and maintenance are not optional topics. Waterproofing, drainage, retaining considerations, renovation quality, and long-term upkeep plans should be evaluated carefully. In Joá, beautiful must also mean sound. Then we look at liquidity and future resale logic. Joá attracts a specific buyer profile, and the property should match what that profile typically wants. Some homes are dream homes, but never dream homes. That can affect resale later. And finally, we test documentation readiness because the easiest purchase is the one that can be verified and closed clearly. This is exactly why we built a property shortlist service to apply these filters before you invest your time in wrong viewings. Property shortlist service. If you explore Joá seriously, ask us about our property shortlist service. You tell us your priorities, your non-negotiables, and your budget, and we curate a short list that matches your real goals, not just your Pinterest board. We cut the noise, validate what's worth considering, and focus your attention on the priorities that make sense in Joá. When you are ready to proceed, we coordinate with the right professionals so the due diligence, documentation flow, and compliance needed are handled properly. To start, reach out through the contact link below or email us at info@camilasaunier.com with the subject line Joá Short List, and my team will reply with the next steps. 7 mistakes foreigners make in Joá. Joá is stunning, but it's not the place to buy based on emotion alone. A common mistake is purchasing for the panorama view, overlooking the property's real maintenance profile. Another is underestimating how much access and slope affects your daily life, especially if you're imagining a walk everywhere routine. I also see foreigners assume that every property here behaves the same in terms of privacy and security. In reality, the building or community structure matters, and so does the exact position of the home. Another mistake is treating renovations as proof of quality. In a cliffside market, renovation style is not the same as renovation substance. You want to know what sits behind the walls and under the surface. Budget planning is another trap. Buying the home is one part of the cost. Owning the home is another. In Joá, ongoing upkeep can be meaningfully different from a standard apartment lifestyle. And the biggest mistake is trying to handle the legal and compliance side informally. Foreign buyers should not gamble with documentation, due diligence, or currency exchange compliance. That's why we coordinate with Oliveira lawyers when those pieces are part of the transactions. Residency pathway for foreign buyers considering a home in Rio, not only as a lifestyle decision, but as a part of a broader Brazil plan. Brazil has residency pathways that may relate to investors depending on your circumstances. This is not something I can advise on as a realtor, and it should never be approached through guesses or online shortcuts. If residency is on your horizon, we coordinate with all of our lawyers so you get the guidance aligned with your profile and the current legal framework. My take-home message to you: Joá is not better than Leblon or Ipanema. It's a different promise. If you want a neighborhood that feels calmer, more private, and more space-oriented, Joá can be one of Rio's most intelligent luxury choices. But it requires a buyer who is willing to choose carefully, verify, and prioritize fundamentals over fantasy. If you would like us to build your shortlist, ask about our property shortlist service, tell us what you are comparing, what lifestyle you want, and what you are trying to avoid. And we will tell you what is realistic, what is worth seeing, and what you should ignore. And if you want a follow-up video, comment what you are deciding between: Joá versus São Conrado, Joá versus Barra, house versus apartment, ocean view exposure, or more sheltered positioning. I read the comments and we create new videos based on what foreign buyers are actually trying to decide right now. Remember to subscribe and follow because we publish fresh Brazilian focused videos regularly. And I will see you on the next one about Rio. See you next time.